standing at the control panel here. It's really good, actually. This is like some sort of 1960s Star Trek thing, and it's pretty good because what I can get it to do. So this is what we're going to use in a few minutes, because this is our transition timeline. Now we've been developing this for about a year and a bit. So I just wanted not to spend very long, but just to think about what is Worthing's response, because this is really what we've seen in that film. Is the reason that Transition Town Worthing exists, because we think that those issues are life-changing. We think the next 20 years are likely to be totally different to the last 20 years. That's why we're looking at coming up with a 20-year plan. So, actually we've got 19 years, because we've gone from 2011 to 2030 over there. And you might think, well, that's too long maybe, if what he says is all correct, maybe we haven't got that long. So we might be thinking of shifting sands. The goalpost might be constantly shifting over that next 19, 20 years, and then what happens after that? So our response as a transition town is to try and come up with what's called an energy descent action plan. And some of you will have a bit of an idea what that is, some of you might not. So I'm just going to quickly talk about some of the issues that Transition Town Worthing has been dealing with. And firstly, again, some of you might be familiar with some of these things. These are some of the recognitions of the transition movement. And the first one is the energy one. We've got a plan for a future with less available energy. It's inevitable, it's going to happen. And we'd rather have something in place, we'd rather have some sort of plan in place, rather than to reach that point where we're over the edge of the energy cliff and then we haven't got anything, we can't function because we haven't thought about what's going to come next, what's going to come after a while. We could also think, what's happened in Worthing over the last, 50, 60 years, 100 years? How has Worthing changed? A few of us have been carrying out interviews, oral history interviews, with people in their sort of 80s, 90s, who've lived in Worthing pretty much their whole life, and they've seen massive changes in Worthing in that time. Not just the rise of the motor car, but they've also seen things disappear from Worthing. Worthing maybe used to have lots of things that it doesn't have today. It used to have huge growing areas, market gardening areas. It used to have family businesses. It used to have lots of things that have gone from Worthing, and that's what we're talking about with the resilience. Resilience, it's the capacity of something to respond to some sort of shock, some sort of problem situation. We're thinking, well, maybe we've lost some of that resilience, certainly since we've got used to having very, very cheap oil, which actually, even at £6 a gallon, is cheap compared to what it could potentially be. The third one, there's four of these by the way, so the third one is that we've got to act for ourselves as a community, and we've got to act now. We can't afford to wait for someone to come away with a magic wand. We can't afford to wait for the government to sort it out, or the council to sort it out. We're a community, we're here, we're hopefully aware of some of these issues, and so we've got to start thinking through what's our response going to be. Whether we think of it in terms of what Chris Martenson said, in terms of it's a problem, so therefore we need to find a solution, or is it more in terms of it's a predicament, so we've got to think, well, what are the outcomes? How are we going to manage those outcomes? And then the fourth one, well, that's everyone in this room really. It's the collective genius of Worthing. And we've all got something to bring to it. We've all got something to bring to the party, if you like, to design change, to design what we want, how we want our community to function 10, 15, 20 years plus in the future. So can we try and put something together that's better than we've got at the present? I'm thinking we've already got a lot of people on board in Transition Town Worthing who've got some fantastic ideas and thoughts about this. So what we're working on at the moment is the Energy Descent Action Plan, or the EDAP for short. And this is basically, it will be a document, but we're not talking about a boring sort of dry council type document that you fall asleep reading after the first page, or you fall into some boredom related coma. It's something that we want to be, it's a vision that the community have all contributed to think, okay, well, how would we deal with this situation? Less energy in the future, less resources, economic meltdown, we're looking at a powered down society, so using less energy in the future, but also having to look more locally. What are our resources that we've got locally that we can use? And that bottom point is really that it's a very creative process. So although, you know, potentially there's lots of threats there in the video we saw and challenges, there's also these opportunities for the community to come together and actually become involved, become active, proactive, and become hands-on with the sort of changes that we're looking at. So the picture, I don't know what the picture is, it's something that's found somewhere on the internet probably, but you know, this is sort of this vision, potential vision of the future. I'm not saying that's what Worthing should look like in 2030 by any stretch of the imagination, but it's, you know, some sort of vision of the future. And so often when we think about what is the future going to be like, it's all too easy to think it's a bleak sort of place. But does it have the process that we're running through? Well, just to give you a bit of an outline, we've been working on our sort of timeline, and we've been doing visioning exercises in groups over the last year or so. We've been running these oral histories that I've mentioned, and we've done about 4 or 5 of those in Worthing. A couple of weeks ago, some of us in this room were at the launch of our EDAP project at the Ardenton Hotel, so we sort of got the process started off there. You're here tonight for the crash course, which is, you know, integral part of this. Over the next few months, we need to be collecting some baseline data, so data about what Worthing is like now. You know, what have we got here in Worthing now in terms of land resources, population, you know, food availability, you know, all of these sorts of things. So, you know, there's 1 or 2 members of the group who were quite into their data collection. As we move through into May and June in the summer, we'll be looking at our transition town Worthing groups to try and work on their own timelines, if possible. Some transition groups have already started doing that. We've got groups looking at local food, looking at reskilling, looking at energy, looking at transport, and so on. We'll also be thinking about, well, what are we going to do with our energy descent action plan? We'd like to publish it. We don't know at the moment whether that means we need to apply for some funding to get bids to produce something that goes out free to as many people in Worthing as possible, or whether we actually try and get it published, which is what some other transition towns have done. On the 3rd of May, we're going to be launching our Transition Tales project, and this is like a creative writing project, and we want to aim it at sort of largely at schools, if possible. We have been invited into some local schools because we're talking about what's going to happen over the next 15, 20 years. You know, we've got to engage people who are currently at school. They're going to be the decision makers in 20 years' time. So that's a creative project, and it's something that we're hoping a lot of people will want to get involved in. We're going to be running a competition, and we're hoping that maybe, you know, people of non-school age would also want to be getting creative and writing about what they think the future might be like in Worthing in 2030 and beyond. That might be things like stories, might be poems, might be newspaper articles, could be Lonely Hearts columns or used car ads, or, you know, anything like that really. On the 12th of June, we've got our World Cafe event. That's going to be at the Quaker Meeting House, and that's going to be a chance to get together all of the information that we've developed on the timeline. And we've got about 8 pages of points to work on there to put it into some sort of overall plan, and so it makes sense. So it fulfills some sort of logical progression. And then the later months of the year, we're going to be working on getting our first draft done. And then hopefully by about this time next year, we want to be able to get it published and to celebrate, to say, okay, we've taken our first step. And that really is only the first step, because once that's in place, then we've got to find a way of trying to implement it and get it working. So that's the process we're going through. So how can, you know, what's your part in that process? It's basically getting involved. You know, we've got a whole range of projects already underway. I mentioned the Transition Tales thing, but we've got permaculture gardens got going on. We've got garden share projects. There's a whole range of different things potentially to get involved in. You know, we've got a very active online community. We can't always meet like this face to face. This is why, you know, we're a little community in here. It'd be good to talk to each other as much as possible tonight. It's by you getting hands-on and contributing to the timeline. that we've got. You know, what would you like to see? What do you expect to see change in Worthing? We've also been doing quite a lot of videoing recently, farmers markets and different events and things like that. What we're going to say actually at the last part of this evening, if anyone wants to share their feelings about the film that they've seen tonight, we will have a little corner over here, and we'd be happy to do a little sort of, even if it's just a 10-second video clip from you saying, you know, what you think Worthing's response might be. That'd be great. And the other thing is, you know, get other people involved. We've all got friends and neighbours maybe that we could get involved in this. So it's, you know, there we go. It's thinking about where we fit in to this whole process. So that was the end of the slideshow, just to get you sort of thinking about this. So in a minute, I'm going to just unplug these things so you've got access to the front, and I'm going to use my little 1960s control panel, raise this up so it's a little bit higher. Now what we've got, either side of the board, we've got lots of post-it notes and lots of biros. Not very sustainable, I'm afraid. These are all Bics made of plastic, which obviously is very, you know, oil-derived writing implements. But what we'd like you to come and try and do is to come and scribble on these. So whatever you want to say, you know, it might be, well, Worthing's got to, you know, we've got to increase massively the amount of food that we produce locally in gardens and things in Worthing, and we've got to, you know, we've got to treble that by 2014. So that might be one of the things that you want to just stick on to a particular year. You might think, well, you know, how are things going to change by 2020? What are we going to see in terms of transport, see in terms of energy use, see in terms of how land is used in and around Worthing. So it's whatever, you know, your imagination wants to put onto this. And that's, you know, that's really only our only limitation on this today. So those are there either side of the room. We're going to invite you to come down and do that.